Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of She-Hulk. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, so the question was going to be like, all right, people were saying like, all right, we got Leapfrog left and we got Daredevil. So could it be like, will Leapfrog and Daredevil be in the same episode? Will Leapfrog be one episode and Daredevil be the season finale? It is both, interestingly enough. We got introduced to Leapfrog, and I love that. It's like, right, he gets his suit made by Luke, but there's been a malfunction, and he's like, oh, I'm you're a guard frog, trying to like play on guard, and the thieves are like, what are you talking about, dude? And he's like, my name is Leapfrog, and he's getting his ass handed to him, and he tries to leave with like jetpacks on his feet, but they fail. He lands, and they beat the ever-living crap out of him, and he tries to get away. So now he wants to sue the person who made his suit, Luke, which now, Jennifer finds herself in another, like, ooh, this seems like a little bit of just kind of like the whole Blonsky thing of, hey, this is a little bit of a conflict of interest, because it's like, hey, the person who made this person's suit is also the person who made my suit, so maybe Pug should be the one to take over this case. It's like, nah, you should be able to find a way to mitigate this, because maybe you can talk to Luke, which Luke wanted nothing in that conversation. He was like, how dare you say that my Luke... Oh, he's like, oh, you hear that? Oh my God, Jennifer's not going to have a dress for me, and rips the dress. He's like, no dress from you. And she's like, fine, I will take you down in court. I'm like, oh boy, it's come down to this. I was like, that sucks. I mean, luckily for you, you already got your suit. Granted, the dress he was going to make for you, you're like already prepaid for it, but he doesn't care. But the moment they got in that courtroom, and it's like, oh, you're going to be representing yourself, I was like, wait, is this it? Is this it? I was like, yo. I was like, it's the moment, isn't it? And it's like, yeah, Matt Murdock, I love it. And he's just kind of like, yeah, I walked, what was it? Yeah, I couldn't find a parking space. Joking, Your Honor, my driver got lost. And I just love Jen turning to him, who is this asshole? And it's like, and their little repertoire back and forth I thought was pretty neat, where it's just kind of like, okay, now we end up in this interesting conversation about like, right, she wants Discovery to be able to bring into evidence a list, make Luke basically give out his client list so they could basically check with anyone else to see if there's been any malfunctions with anyone else's suit. But, obviously Matt's coming from the perspective of, from a personal situation of like, it's a little bit of a conflict of interest as well, but he's coming at it from like, these are people who are superheroes. The difference is Jennifer put her identity out there. There are people out there who have a secret identity, and that could be compromised if Luke's list gets out there, because it's about protecting the people that they love and they care about, your typical superhero element, and that back and forth. Lawyer talk about, Jen trying to like skirt around that, saying like, and I forgot her exact wording, but she was finding her way to skirt around it, and so was Matt. And he even brought up this interesting point. He said like, oh yeah, like I can't remember the exact word he said. He either said the Sokovia Accords were either repealed or appealed, but it was like, oh, like, has that been a known thing in the MCU canon? Because I'm like, they get brought up, like, sprinkled in here and there, the Sokovia Accords, but I don't remember where they stand in the grand scheme of things. So I was like, oh, like, well, I think he said they've been repealed, I think, or maybe appealed. Like I said, I don't remember the exact word, but I guess it's like, right, they're no longer a thing. I don't know if that's a blip 5-year time skip thing, or maybe that was a thing even before it. I feel like it was still in effect even during Infinity War, so that feels like that had to be like either during the blip or post blip, post Endgame. I don't know. Either way. So I just thought that was interesting information. So it's like, right, superheroes are protected under that act again of like, well, are now protected. Like, right, we have the right to do our thing. Yeah, it might be vigilantism, but we're like allowed to like not have the government have to know our identity. So, but the problem with all of this is, turns out, Matt could smell it on the suit that he used the wrong fuel, even though Luke told him the very specific instructions on what to do. So now it's like, Jen's like, cool, I thought my client was an idiot. He's an even bigger idiot than I thought. So they kind of lost the case. And Jen lost her suit maker because she's like, oh, we're good, right? And he's like, oh, Jennifer, Jen. No. And just bounces. But I love that, I even love, Jen and Matt having their conversation. I even I was catching those vibes. I was like, yo, are you? Because I don't know if they've ever hooked up in the comic books or not. And I was like, they probably have. I mean, not shaming her or anything, but I think she's probably hooked up with a few heroes here and there. Because like she's very like, because I think, I mean, at least my understanding in the comics, like She-Hulk has always been a very sex positive character in the regard of like, yeah, she gets it in and no shame about it. It's like, yo, like, I don't know if she has like a very like strong libido or anything like that, but I'm curious, probably just a very average libido, but it was just like, that's kind of like a thing of like, yeah, like the show kind of leans into like the relationships and sex and stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's part of her character, which I'm like, I think that's so interesting because nothing superhero ever touched that. Like, it's almost like oh man, superheroes have sex. It's like, yeah, I don't really touch. Once again, I mean, the whole joke about at the very beginning about Cap being Steve being a virgin, so it's not something that gets talked about a lot. They kind of stray away from that subject. I don't know if they probably lean into it, at least with certain characters like She-Hulk, they lean into it more in the comics, but even I was catching those vibes between and it's just so cool to have Charlie Cox and Tatiana Maslany in the same scene together. I'm like, dude, it feels unreal. It's like, yeah, we've all been wanting this. And yeah, like, I know a lot of people are upset that it's not happening sooner. I'm just excited it's happening and all. That's sick. The fact is we're having this, it feels so weird when you think about, Daredevil and the Defenders and the Netflix stuff. Never would you ever thought like it would have been brought into like the mainline canon of, yes, they have changed some things because Jennifer says like, oh, do you work by yourself? So that means potentially, canonically speaking, currently, there is no Foggy, there is no Karen. Now, because I think we still don't know the full casting of what the Daredevil Born Again conversation is. There's a conversation of, it's not season 4, it's season 1. But the question is it season 4 is season 1 in regard of, it's like a new spin-off series. So it's a new series, kind of like going from Bosch to, Bosch Legacy? Are we talking something like that? Or are we talking more along the lanes of, it is just a full-blown soft reboot? So either like, Karen and Foggy are already a thing and it just like, they're not together anymore. Like none of them are together. Or I wonder if She-Hulk, like by the time we get to Born Again, it's going to like time skip through some stuff. Like all the Foggy and Karen stuff is going to happen after his appearance here in Daredevil. So I'm wondering, will they kind of softball it like that? It opens up a whole window of conversation about that. I'll actually probably talk about that in a future video, kind of talking about that. But either way, putting all that aside, but you can tell that even like Jen's going to the camera, like, yo, am I the only one that's like feeling something here? But she's getting contacted by Todd. He gets called off by something else. And it's just like, oh no, oh God. And she's like, fine. She goes to see Todd and Todd's like, what was it he was saying? He was like, oh yeah, I got a Wakandan spear. I'm like, oh, you seem like such a douchebag. And he's just like, yeah, like, look, he's just like, oh yeah, I spent $1 million on it. And she just stone-faced. He's like, $1 million. Stone-faced. $1 million. She's like, no, I got it. And it's just kind of like, he was like, yeah, like I studied abroad in Wakanda. He's like, Wakanda forever. And she's like, ooh, don't do that. Ooh, don't. I was like, oh, that's so good. Oh, I love it. I love it so much. And then he's like trying to make moves. He's like, yeah, let's stop playing cool. She's like, ew, gross. All right, I'm going to charge you for the full hour. Leave me alone. And bounces. But then her client calls her and she's in trouble. And like the moment someone's on the roof, I was like, Daredevil? I'm like, well, why is he going after Leapfrog? Well, Jen and him kind of tussle a little bit. So I love that. First and foremost, the debut of the suit. I'm like, hell yeah. And also her going toe-to-toe with Daredevil. So I like that you start off on opposite sides. And I love that she ends up finding out it's Matt. It's like, oh. And I also love, like, because that was the whole conversation, once again, about the Daredevil conversation of people being like, well, they were nervous because of, like, right, Matt in the Daredevil's show was very bleak and kind of dark and just like he had fun here and there, but it wasn't a fun show. I mean, entertainment wise, yes, but it wasn't. It was like a darker, grittier show, right? So people didn't know like what they figured like, oh, Disney's going to Disneyfy him, and it's like, well, the conversation people have had is, well, Daredevil in the comics have apparently. He fits the tone of what he needs to be. Like, oh, if it's dark and gritty, he can be dark and gritty in his comics. But he could also fit the tone of others. I mean, it makes sense because that's why, like, well, we know he, like, kicks it with Peter. So, like, Spider-Man doesn't always have, like, the darkest tone. So I could definitely see, like, right, you probably, like, he kind of, like, catches everyone else's ebb and flow. He follows the ebb and flow of whatever characters, like, comic he's in at the time. So, like, this is a She-Hulk show. So you're, like, he's a little, like, zingy, you know, which once again, that's going to be an issue that certain people have. They're like, oh my God, they made Daredevil quippy. It's like, well, to be fair, he's in a sitcom show, but that's an issue that people have in general with the MCU, the whole quippiness of it. Like, I don't have a problem with it. It just feels so ingrained with superheroism that like, I don't have that same criticism that people have, but I know him being quippy in this might be an issue, but I still feel like he's still him from time to, but like because I feel like in Defenders, he was quippy, especially like around Jessica, he was definitely quippy. So, you know, so it's not like completely out of left field. It is still even if this is a different Earth version of that character, it's a different continuity, it's still being in the same vein. I feel like it's not like you're straying so far. It's like, no, it's still kind of who Matt is, you know, because like I said, because even that Daredevil, it wasn't often, but even he was quippy from time to time. And so she's like, oh, I'm about to whoop your ass. He's like, oh, my ass still seems unwhooped. But then she finds out about him. It's like, whoa, wait. She's like, whoa, are you actually not blind? Because she's like, you know, that's actually problematic. And I was like, I love that joke because there's like a two-layeredness to it. Because it's like, yes, like you should be pretending to be blind. But then obviously you have the element of, well, it is an actor who can see playing a blind. Like, there's a deeper layer to that. And he's like, no, I can't. No, I really am blind. It's like, wait, you're a superhero? It's like, yeah. He's like, you know, she's like, who are you? And he's like, I'm Daredevil. And she's like, am I supposed to know who that is? So I guess he is, at least in this universe, established enough, but he's still so small time. And it's like, well, you're out here, you're not in New York, so it kind of, you know, makes sense. But I just thought that was so interesting. And she's like, yeah, I mean, you look like what was it, yellow and she was like mustard and ketchup, and he's like, oh, do you want me to tell Luke? That's what she said about it. She's like, no, please don't tell him. And I'm like, I love how like this little back and forth they have, but it's like, why are you going after Leapfrog? Well, he kidnapped Luke. It's like, why didn't you say that at the beginning? It's like, oh, why'd you immediately try to whoop my ass? I love it. And it's like, because this is her first outing as a superhero, and for him, it's like, you know, I've done this before, so they do their thing. They follow him to his, it's like, oh, have you ever like destroyed a parking garage before? She said, oh, I'm gonna leave a note. I am curious like how you are going to cover that. Like maybe the law firm, will cover any damages like that. I mean, maybe there's like a tax money goes to like, you know, there's been probably like stuff put in place because of superheroes. Like, we have money set aside to repair stuff. I don't know. Maybe like her, like I said, her law firm has like, in case of like superhero destruction, like there's insurance covering that. I don't know. Either way, they do their thing, and Leapfrog's asking like Luke all this stuff for a suit. He's like, yeah, bulletproof shield, which I'm like, okay, I'm only assuming that's a little bit of Captain America. And be like, oh, I want like a AI that's British guy. And I'm like, okay, there's a little Iron Man there. And Luke said like, I don't know who told you that this green was your color, but they were wrong. And he's like, hey, I know you're upset that I kidnapped you, but that's still mean and words hurt. And so Matt's overhearing like everything. He's like, all right, there's this many people, this many people, this many people. It's like, wait, how do you know? It's like, well, I can hear them all. And he's like, I can hear their heartbeat. She's like, no, you can't. And he's like, I can hear your heartbeat right now. She's like, what? It's like, yeah, it's getting real fast. And she's like, what? No, it's not. I'm healthy. I'm like, I love that. And he's like, all right, so I'm gonna take down like the 10 guys. I'm just gonna take about 15 seconds per one guy. She's like, I don't have half an hour for you to take down 10 guys. And he's like, that math is not right. I was like, I love that because it equals about what, 2.5 minutes. I love that she like screwed up the math in her head. I think that's kind of a cute thing to be like, oh yeah, she is smart, but it's like she's terrible at math. So I don't know whether she was saying that jokingly or whether she legitimately screwed the math up that badly. And it's just like, she's like, right, let me just go in and do my She-Hulk thing. It's like, well, you've never done this before. Like, I'm the veteran. And it's like, let me handle this. Does the whole, like, Daredevil thing, leaping off the building. She's like, all right, honestly, that was pretty sick. He goes in, does his thing. And I love how they play with it a little bit, because it's like, all right, we're going to do a little bit. Because they even set it up. After he took out the initial guys, he's not as brutal, but we get some of that brutality. It's not going to be bloody, bones-breaking Daredevil. They're already setting it up. I mean, because it's She-Hulk, yes, but they're also probably not going to go that hard in the paint for Daredevil. They kind of don't have to, but I know that brutality is kind of what people are used to, so we'll see. But, because I don't remember, I don't think it's been a while since I've seen the original series. I don't think it's, because they are seeming to lean into more comic accuracy, because Fisk in Hawkeye was a lot more like, oh, super strong and like a straight up unit, I guess you could say. But like, I don't know if Matt's powers were always that enhanced. The quote unquote echolocation, as they put it. But I love they set it up with all of them at the end of the hallway, and there he is standing. I was like, are we going to get it? I was like, there's no way we're actually going to get a hallway fight. What's going to end up happening is she's going to interrupt it, isn't it? And it's like, they're setting up the moment, and bam, she comes crashing through. She-Hulk smash, and he's like, cool, So they end up going up against Leapfrog and his men, and it's like, Jen's like, okay, stop this before you end up making things worse. We can make it seem like it was temporary mania. And then even Matt adding in, being like, oh yeah, we could like really lean into that. And it's like, wait, is Devil Guy a lawyer too? He's like, no, I'm a really big fan of law dramas, and it's like, oh. And she's like, oh my God, this is really doing it for me. I'm like, yeah. And I love how dude ends up running away. He leaps out the window, I guess because no jetpacks were equipped to the suit. The just suit was fixed or whatever by Luke, and falls and hurts his legs. I'm like, man, you just suck. Is that character a hero or a villain in the comics? I'm curious to look into it. He might be a hero that turned, I mean, he's like a temporary villain in this. He was just kind of a spoiled brat, But when it's all said and done, it's like, hey, will you make it's like, fine, we're even, I'll make you your suit. It's like, yay! Just try not to go like too above board, like don't get too bloated before then. I was like, man, that's the dickish thing you could say. But it's like, all right, my suit's being made, and Jennifer sits down and has her talk with Matt. He's like, yeah, I'm not really the talking to cops type. And it's like, hey, you're the guy that wanted to wait half an hour to take down one guy. He's like, you're still not doing that math right. But it's like, hey, like, if I'm ever in town again, I'd love to ask you for dinner. She's like, well, how about we could always just skip that. And I'm like, are we doing this? They go back, and she's trying to get this suit off of him. And he's like, yeah, it's how you, I'm like, oh my God. I was like, this is amazing. I was like, we get superhero banging in this universe, because we haven't really, I mean, there's implied superhero banging, but we definitely, it's not implied here, baby. It's not shown, but it's like, yo, we know they were both getting it in. And then he does the walk of shame outside in the suit, no boots on, and apparently Nikki walked by him and everything. Like, oh my God, I just saw a guy in depth. She's like, yeah. I'm like, what? I'm like, dude, this is amazing. But then Jennifer's like, why is this episode still going on? I mean, that came to a satisfying end. I mean, she's like, seriously, it was really satisfying. I was like, yo, get your thing, girl. But yeah, like, she's like, why is the episode going on? It's like, wait, the gala, that's happening? It's like, oh, it's like the next episode, the big finale. She's like, oh, like the tacked on finale thing. So either like, is it going to be one of those things where like it's revealed there's another Hulk, but he's red, or is it going to be a thing where I end up in a freezer? I was like, oh, I love the cheekiness of that. She's like, you know what? Forget it. I'm game. Ends up going there. Mom and dad are waiting for her. Lo and behold, Todd's kind of waving and stuff too. So it's like, okay, cool. So the event's going on. It's like, female lawyer of the year. And then she gets up. But then other people too. I was like, oh, is it a participation trophy? I'm going to just say it. Like, is that supposed to be a commentary on the fact is that all of the female lawyers that currently work in the city? I'm wondering, is that what that's supposed to be in reference to? Like, why so many? It's like, oh yeah, these are the only women. Like, I don't know if that's supposed to be. It's like, oh, like, what is it? How does it feel to be? And I love Mallory just kind of giving it as it is. Like, oh, like, doubly worked, half as respected or something like that. And she was like, how it's always nice to always be asked about how's it feel to be a female lawyer. And Pug and Nikki like doing like the poetry snap in the air, like, yep, speak the truth. I love that. And before Jennifer could have her moment, lo and behold, Intelligentsia did their thing. And I knew something was up with the fact that Josh took that picture of her afterwards. I was immediately like, oh my God, that's gross. Like, I was like, it felt like, I was like, well, I guess it is just simply because he got her blood. I didn't really pay attention to the emojis he used last episode, but now I do. I did, and I was like, okay. But the fact is, like, you taking a picture of her like that, I was like, that seemed really gross. And now it's like, oh, cool. So it's like blasting all the stuff off her phone, like the Captain America memes. I guess like her obsession with Steve. And then like other stuff. I didn't catch all of the other stuff off of her phone. And then they said, oh, and she's a slut. And you're like, ooh, okay. Which I'm sure people are going to have a conversation about that. I don't know how most people felt about it. I think it's an interesting commentary on like the modern day, like just how, once again, like Intelligentsia is more so like, it's that side of the internet you don't go to. It's that, what was it, 4chan type of fucking 8chan. I think it's just, let's stick with 4chan. Like, I think that's the darker side enough on the internet without going to the deep dark shit. But it's like, yeah, it's kind of more a commentary on that type of side of the internet where like the most vile amount of human beings kind of collect to kind of spit some vile shit. And just the fact is, even I was like, oh my God, like even calling her a slut, I was like, damn, dude. Because that, and which I think that's also interesting too, how they brought in like the revenge porn into that, because sadly that is a thing. And it's like, right, here's someone trying to embarrass her, make her seem like, so now we kind of get context, because in the trailer I do remember like people out her front door like flashing the camera. Like I was wondering what that was all about, because like nothing had came up that really warranted that. So I was like, what was this about? Oh, because like they are legitimately trying to besmirch her by being like, look at her. Oh, like you're acting like she's this hero. And what did they specifically say? She took this power from her cousin and was like, yo, I think like, once again, because what this group is in the comics, I think they've modernized it and made it a whole, like the best example I was going to use is like, I don't know how most people felt about it, but spoilers, for the Batman, they made the Riddler more like, oh, it's kind of an incel thing. Like type of like loner that, wants attention, is doing some terrible stuff for, trying to, speak to everyone that's like them. It feels like it's in that same vein. So to know they're all part of that, it's like, wow, that makes Josh even more of a bigger piece. Like, man, you thought Josh was like terrible last episode, makes him even more of a garbage piece of shit than you thought before. And you're like, man, you suck so much. I was like, that's interesting. So like now it's like, whoa, the more so reaction is because Jen snapped, and she had every right to. But then we get into what Bruce brought up at the very beginning of the season. Like the fact is, once they see you as a monster, there's no going back. And it's so sad because Matt gave her the advice of, hey, you as Jennifer Walters, when society fails people, you can be there for the law. But when the law fails people, you can be there as She-Hulk. The best of both worlds. And I think going forward, that's where she will be. But this next hurdle is like, just like your cousin warned you, people are turning against you. And once again, maybe that was the whole point. It's like, oh, look at this monster. But it's like, and I think like legitimately, I don't want to turn this into that conversation. Yes, there is a side of the internet that this reflects. Everyone who doesn't like the show, this isn't like an attack against everyone that doesn't like the show. You can have your respective reasons to not like the show. That's not what it's talking about. I'm just talking about the general vileness that sometimes gets associated with the show, with the fan base. Just like any fan base could have like those vile elements to it. Like I feel like it's almost a response, like those people in particular can get lumped into it. Once again, you having criticisms of the show, you're not liking the show. I'm not equating that. I'm just talking about the people who kind of act shitty when it comes to this show. Like shitty in a very unnecessary way, and just that whole lane of things online. I feel like it could almost be swerved into that. But that's why I'm like, it does seem like this is what they believe, but I'm also curious, is it also because like, no, we want to make you seem like the monster. We want to piss you off enough, have enough ammunition and everything so that we could piss you off. And I'm curious, is that what the Hulk blood is for? Because it's like, right, she's undeserving. No woman who has to take her power from a man, like she had to take them from the Hulk. She doesn't deserve that power. So what we're going to do is we're going to give it to someone who actually deserves it. So kind of bored up, once again, kind of like trying to make an incel Hulk type of thing. Like I feel like could be the commentary that's going on here. Once again, I'm interested to see how the internet responds to this episode. I'm always interested to see. I try to avoid it, but I just, I pick up some stuff here and there about like generally how people feel about things. So it's just, I enjoy this show so much, but like the conversation around it gets so toxic. And once again, I'm feeding into it by talking about that toxicity. It's just like, I need to separate myself from it sometimes, but it's like, you can't help it. Because like anything I watch in the show, I'm immediately like, oh God, the internet's going to have a field day with that, aren't they? So we'll see how that all plays out, how people respond to those elements. But I thought it was such an interesting, I wasn't expecting it to take that turn, especially like the slut shaming of it all. Once again, like you having it's like, it gets to that territory of like not generalizing like, oh, every woman that has like a bigger sex drive gets treated that way. But it's like, no, but it is that kind of negative connotation for having, being very sex positive. There is that double standard of, if you're a guy, it's fine. You're a lady who do it. Oh, you're a slut, so it's like, it turns into that whole thing. So I am very, very interested to see where the next episode takes us. Once again, it is the season finale. I do hope it is a season finale. I hope we get another season of it. Once again, I legitimately don't care what the rest of the internet says. I don't care. I want a second season of the show. I want the show to go on for multiple seasons because I feel like this is the pocket to put She-Hulk in like a TV show. I mean, not saying she can't pop up in movies, but I think a TV show format fits that character so much. So I would love the show to continue into a second season. We hope not just a second season. I hope we get even more seasons, but at the very least, I'd want it at the very least a second season. So we'll ultimately have to wait and see how everything plays out going forward into the next episode, how the season wraps up. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.